True story. I was taking the quiver off my son's bow the other day, and it dawned on me that sucker is over 30 years old. It made me laugh enough that I called Drew and I said, hey, what a poor business model, you guys selling products that last over 30 years. He said, why don't you send it to me and I'll refinish it. I was like, man, you know how many bows this thing's been on? Because I don't. Change the hood, change the grippers. I mean, I've wood arrows, aluminum arrows, carbon arrows. That thing's seen it all. And I promise you, I probably would not buy a used bow for me. I'm kind of tough on stuff. So anyways, if you're looking for a quiver, I would tell you, if you want to spend your money once, better look at Selway Archery. You'll have that sucker a long time. Slide-ons, tie-ons, bolt-ons, they got all kinds. Give Drew a holler. Check them out. It'll last a heck of a long time. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Stick Bow Chronicles, brought to you by Blackwidow Bows. I'm Rob Patudo, and I got my main man, Blake. What's going on, buddy?
Hi.
What the hell?
I was just trying to freshen it up a little, man.
Yeah, I know. We're getting stale. This week's episode, much anticipated by a whole bunch of bear archery aficionados there on Facebook. There's guys pretty excited about this one. I got John Kabisa. He is a collector of all things bear archery.
Yeah, and I wasn't able to get in on this one. It was the kind of a middle of the day thing. I was working, but yeah, I look forward to listening to it. He's got a whole bunch of cool stuff, it sounds like.
Man, he's got Fred Bear's last bow. What do you say? It was a B handle. It's a really light. I've seen the picture of it. It's really light colored, like the Hard Rock maple. And it's signed by Fred Bear, I guess, as a joke. Happy hunting, Fred Bear, to himself. Anyways, and he also, the other one that blew me away is he's got. If you go on YouTube, you can find the hunt where he stalks a feeding grizzly, and it was kind of cutting edge at the time because the camera work was for that era is fantastic, and the sound and all that. Anyways, he whistles, the bear stands up, he shoots it, and John has the arrow that he shot that with. It's all bent. You can see it, later on they stick it in a log there, and it's got the actual arrow.
Yeah, that's neat. It's real neat.
So it was a lot of fun talking to John. I think you guys will enjoy it. I like talking that history stuff. It's pretty easy. I enjoy it.
Yeah, and I always enjoy listening to it because that's one of those things that, people my age, I feel like lack on, including myself. We need to concentrate more on knowing where we came from, who came before us, what they did. And so I always look forward to listening to these.
Yep, and I've got to make a correction. Last week with Becca Garris, I apparently said that the Compton Rendezvous was canceled. One of many things that I say are dumb, and there was a lot of people that pointed out, hey, you just said something dumb, because it's not canceled. Father's Day weekend, Berrien Springs, Michigan, Compton's Rendezvous, it is still on. They're going to start advertising it heavy here soon, but just wanted to eat a little crow here on the Stick Bow Chronicles. I do that often.
Yeah, you ought to have a pretty good recipe for it by now.
Oh, and I can eat a lot, man. I can eat a lot. Hey, we did some late night podcast in there for next week's episode, and I'm looking on your desk there, and I see the top of a beer bottle and the top of a Red Bull can. Which one are you working on right now? Because it's early.
Working on the Red Bull, but I mixed them last night, so I just pour them both in the same glass and just hammer down.
Nasty, dude. That is nasty. I have never drinking a Red Bull ever.
You don't want a guy with wings that's drunk. Flying while drunk.
I have never drank a Red Bull, and I've never drank an espresso. It's two claims to fame.
Nectar of the gods that Red Bull is. Then they charge you for it too.
So anyways, you're a Red Bull guy. I'm a coffee guy. I'm a coffee-aholic. And apparently I've mentioned it more than once on the podcast because Zach and Jonathan from Backwoods Grind Coffee Company gave me a holler, I don't know, a month and a half ago and said, hey, we hear you drink coffee. We like your podcast. Why don't you try some? So they sent some coffee up, and it is extremely good. And I drink a lot of coffee, so I feel like I can be a good judge. So they came on board as sponsors. They're new trad guys. They like what we do. I'm digging what they do. So they're on board as a sponsor.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying some. I'm not a huge coffee drinker, but I drink it in the wintertime and stuff. And on cold mornings, I enjoy having a cup of coffee. But look forward to trying it. You're going to bring some down to the Aoudad hunt. So
that was the plan. If I stop drinking it right now, it might I might have some left. we got like what, 4 days?
Pretty good stuff, huh?
Well, yeah. Are you just like a gas station coffee guy, or you know what you're drinking?
No, I know what I'm drinking. I have a little Keurig here at the house, and I just make a cup or two and go on down the road. But now Cassie, she drinks it, so may get a bigger pot and try some of this stuff out and see if I like it.
Yeah, I like the dark roast, and that's what I'm digging. They got, what is it, a fireside dark roast? It's good stuff, and we have our very first discount code.
Yeah, SB Chronicles 10. For the listeners, you get 10% off. Use SB Chronicles 10 discount code on their website and go support those guys.
Yeah, so
they're supporting us.
Absolutely. Backwoodsgrind.com. They have a 6-pack sampler and they got a 3-pack sampler. Like I said, I've tried like 5 or 6 of their grinds, and that dark roast is the one for me. But yeah, go on there, get some of those samplers, give them a try.
Cool. Yeah, well, we've made it. We have our own discount code now.
Dude, I really, really feel like we made it. Like we're at the pinnacle of excellence.
Instafluencers. That's what we are.
I would be like, you put bad in front of that, I would be the bad influencer. I swear I'd like to go back to some of my high school teachers and go, hey, you know what? I got a podcast. Now, remember when I was talking in the back of the class all the freaking time? I do that now, and people listen. See, you were trying to crush my artistic outlet.
Yeah. There's some things I wish I could go back and do a little different, but
you know what? I don't think I would have done anything different. I would have paid attention a little more in math class, but that's nothing different, man. I freaking had a blast, and it worked.
Here we are.
No, I'm not talking about that. I got a real job, not this.
Making millions. Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
You got anything else?
You got it? I don't. No, I'm good.
I'm going to go out and light a big fire. Got a big
there you go.
Slash pile I got to burn.
I'm going to finish getting this podcast studio set up.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah, I know.
Right on. Big thanks to the sponsors. Kifaru International, Selway Archery, The Footed Shaft, Backwoods Grind Coffee, and, of course, Blackwidow Bows. Well, as long as you guys keep listening and like what we're doing, we'll keep doing her.
You bet.
All right. Roger out. Okay. Hey, John, how's it going today?
It's going good, Rob. How are you?
Not too bad. You're going to have to carry me on this one. I'm just coming off my nights. I got 4 hours of sleep. Blake's on a call that he couldn't get off, or working. He couldn't get off work. So your first time on a podcast, and here you are. You're going to have to host part of this. So
well, I've been there with the work thing, so
yeah.
I get it. But between the two of us, we'll trod through it the best we can.
If you hear me start to snore, just clap
that
your
tells
hands.
Me how boring I am.
No, don't take it personal.
I have to tell you on that note real quick, there's a guy he worked with, and he would always razz me about my Fred Bear thing because I was called Johnny Bear at work and all kinds of nicknames because they all knew I loved Fred Bear. But there's a film, one of my favorite Fred Bear films was called The Restless Spirit, and there's one point where Fred is kind of outside enjoying a beautiful fall day with his sitting on a log with his pipe, or I think he's eating an apple maybe or something. But then he pulls his hat down and falls asleep, and then he's like reminiscing about all these hunts that he had gone on. And I just remember my friend saying, he goes, "Oh, see, that's so boring. Even Fred fell asleep." And
that's a good one.
Well, yeah, I thought it was good too. He was always a smart aleck, but I thought, son of a gun, that's pretty funny. But hopefully that doesn't happen. If you fall asleep, we'll just pretend that you're reminiscing about some hunts that you had gone on too.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. So yeah, you are here among other things because I'm looking forward to talking bear archery, all things Fred Bear. Before we get rolling, talk a little bit about how you got started. You grew up, I think you grew up in Michigan there.
I did. Born in Detroit, and grew up in Michigan my whole life. Yep.
So when did you start hunting?
I started hunting, not with a bow, but in the woods and hunting when I was very young. We moved from Detroit, when the riots hit here in the late 60s. My dad piled all those kids and family and moved out to the suburbs back then in the 60s. Now it's crazy in Farmington Hills, but back then there was a lot of little pockets of woods and fields and ponds. And I grew up, my best friend that lived in the same sub where I had lived, we just got together and we had the same interests, and we would just spend our days out in the woods tromping around. I can remember some of the cool things I saw animal-wise, nature-wise. And we started hunting with BB guns. We got, our first BB guns when we were young. We got pellet guns. We both went to the YMCA, the local YMCA, to get our hunting license, get certified for our hunting license when we were 12. And, we started hunting with shotguns, duck hunting, pheasant hunting, rabbit hunting. But unfortunately, I didn't get into bow hunting until just about the time Fred had died. My dad wasn't a real outdoorsman. He did like to fish, but like a lot of us, he was working a lot of hours, and he just didn't grow up, in a hunting environment. So I didn't grow up hunting with my dad or get introduced to archery or whatever like some guys did. So I got into it on my own at a young age. But a friend of mine from high school kind of got me into bow hunting in the late 80s, and that's kind of took me in the direction of the Fred Bear archery thing.
Yeah, that's it seems like a common theme. You don't have a mentor, growing up that's taking you hunting, and it's pretty much how I started.
Yeah,
but I'll tell you, the key though, I think the key is small game. I see these kids, I see it a lot out west where, parents want to get their kids into hunting, and it's, take them elk hunting or take them deer hunting. Well,
right.
You got to have a mindset to appreciate that. But the action of pheasant hunting or squirrels or rabbits, that's so important to a kid.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't remember seeing deer growing up, and they must have been around there. I know they're around there now, but there's even less woods in that area now than there was when I grew up. But I just don't remember seeing deer and stuff. But I can remember pheasants and even quail and stuff by our house. The neighbor had a little small farm that lived next to us, and there was all kind of brambles and pickers and cover. And I remember seeing quail in there, and it was really fun to hone your skills, I guess, on small game, not really thinking where it was going to lead you. But I remember with my window open in the summer I bought a crow call for some reason, and just using my crow call out my bedroom window. And I remember having crow. We had a little tiny little apple orchard. We had an acre yard. It wasn't like we had a big wooded area, but I can remember crows flying and cawing, landing in the trees. And I don't know if I was given a distress call or, what they were coming to, but I had crows flying everywhere. And I'm in my underwear in my bedroom, calm. I had no idea what I was doing, but it's wow, this is pretty cool. So it was fun. It was a lot of fun, growing up, and just like I said, we'd fish the local ponds and get bluegills and sunfish, and we'd have a fire out in the woods. And, I always said I felt like I was Daniel Boone. I always felt I should have been born 100 or 150 years earlier, because I just loved the older ways of whatever. I loved old things and the way things were and the simple things. So we would make a fire out in the woods and maybe pop our tent up one night and sleep out there and, have a fire and cook eggs on a pan over the fire. And I just can remember that.
Yeah.
Why? I have no idea, because it wasn't, I didn't grow up doing that from my parents or family or anything. So it was just something that I think was in me, and it was fun. It was a good time.
No, I can relate 100%. I had the burning desire, and I think, when you say you felt like you were Daniel Boone, I think there's hundreds of thousands of us across the country that kind of felt the same way. I mean, you get out in the woods, and your imagination, just as a kid, you got your BB gun, you're just laying waste to any songbird that happens by, and
exactly,
awesome. Hey, I want to ask you, you mentioned quail. Do you still have quail? I didn't know quail were in
Michigan. Rob, that's a great question. I'm not a big bird hunter, but I know you don't hear about it too much here in Michigan anymore.
Was it
I
Bob
don't know
White?
If we do. I've seen Bob White quail, and I can remember hearing them, and I can remember seeing coveys of them. Of course, when I was a lot smaller then, but I can remember ducking through the brambles and all the thick stuff by our house, because I saw something and heard these things, and I can remember seeing little coveys running through the brush and stuff. But I don't know if I've never seen any since then. Huh. I know what they look like just out deer hunting now, but I don't bird hunt, so I don't know if we have them here, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've seen pheasants, around here. We've got a lot of state land, and I've seen some pheasants and stuff. But yeah, not too sure on the quail. But that was back in probably the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s at that time. So things changed with the birds like that.
When you got into bow hunting, I'm assuming you got into compounds first?
I did. A friend from high school was hunting locally. I didn't even again, when we had moved got our first house in 85 and moved, my wife and I got married and we moved out to Waterford area. My friend lived in White Lake Commerce area. At the time, there was a lot more, farms and stuff in the area. And he was bow hunting out in this tract of land that I didn't even realize there were deer out there. So he kind of got me started into bow hunting. I got my first deer out there with a shotgun, a Remington 1100 smoothbore, an old deer rifle barrel, scope, nothing. Just went out there with my work clothes on and got my first deer with a shotgun. And then he said, "Man, I've been hunting out here all year. I can't believe." He was freaked out that I got a deer. I go, "Man, I had a huge one. I didn't realize was checking a scrape that I didn't know was on this hill," because he had told me I knew where his stand was, and I couldn't find my spot that I was going to hunt that morning because I got lost out there. I'm total amateur.
Sure.
And I'm wandering around thinking, "Man, I got to get somewhere. It's going to get light pretty soon." I was probably out there 2 hours before daylight wandering around. So I just sat in a bush. Literally, there was a bush. I'm like, I'm just going to sit here. And this huge deer came. I happened to turn around, look behind me up this hill, and I see this huge buck coming down this hill and stopped and doing something. He started walking off. So I thought, well, I didn't want to move because everything I read it then, all my knowledge was what you've read in the magazines and don't move. And I remember as he was going to my weak side, the way I was sitting. So I was hoping he was going to keep coming and walk past me and I could shoot. Well, he kind of walked away from me on my weak side. So I thought, well, I'm going to turn around. They seem to be coming from this way, and turned around and shot. This other one came running by a couple hours later. But where I had gutted him, I told my friend, and we went out there. He goes, "Oh, man," he goes, "we got to move that." He goes, "There's a huge scrape right there." Well, that buck was working that scrape. I didn't even know was there, and that's why he had stopped and whatever. But this thing was beautiful rack on it. I thought, man, why couldn't that have been my first deer? But it was all fun. I took it to his house and told him I got a deer. Him and his wife were so freaked out because he'd been bow hunting all season and hadn't, I don't even know if he saw any bucks or he didn't get a chance at anything. So he was like, "Man, you got a buck?" I go, "Yeah, I missed a huge one, so I got this." He's like, "I can't believe it." So beginner's luck is a real thing.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so I made a good shot. It dropped right there, and
what year was that?
I'm going to say that was probably, I think I got that there in 87.
Yeah. I was just,
if I remember right.
nothing said.
And then shortly after,
so
he was bow hunting out there. So he kind of, we talked about bow hunting, and that's kind of where I started bow hunting. He gave me an old bow. He had patented and designed a bow for Darton, actually, or Darton bought the patent. Didn't go real far with it. They had a couple issues that didn't get worked out, and it kind of fizzled. But Darton gave him a new bow when they took his prototype, and then when he got his, I ended up getting his old bow. So I started with a compound back then.
Nothing said efficiency like compounds in the mid 80s.
Yeah, well, we had everything on there, just I can remember tweaking all the arrows and shooting field tips, and then putting the broadheads on, making sure, because they were three blade fixed heads, and making sure they flew right, and all the sights. I mean, they had so many gadgets on there. I can remember trying to get the lighted sights with the little thing you turn, and that would light the pins up. And I can remember going hunting. One thing about instinctive or traditional, I should say, that is nice, is I can remember one time going out hunting with my compound. I had leaned it against the back of my tailgate on my truck, and it slid off the tailgate and hit the ground. Well, my pin, it bent the pin on one of my pins on my bow. I think my close range, whatever. I think I had two, but anyhow, it bent it. When I went to bend it back, it broke off. So I was pretty much like, well, I can't hunt now. I mean, I don't have the pin. Like, I was a fish out of water already. I didn't even get started, and I was already done. So a lot of trial and error those first several years I bow hunted. I didn't have a whole lot of luck, but boy, I went night and day for a long time with the hope of seeing something or getting a shot at something. So it was fun.
And the excitement. I look back at when you first started, and I didn't know crap from Shinola, and just so excited to be out there. And then it took years to kill my first deer.
Yeah, me too.
And today guys are like, I've been doing this for 4 years. I finally killed something. Like 4 years. Don't talk to me. You must be good.
It took me. I don't remember what year I got my first one, but it took a few years before I finally. And it was an awful scenario. I just got kind of lucky, but in a sense, just setting up a tree and just knowing when to pull. And of course, you didn't have the let off like you do now on some of the bows. At least mine didn't. So I can remember pulling back on this deer and was walking behind a tree. So when it went behind the tree, of course, now it can't see me, and I pulled back. Well, I think the sun was coming up behind me, if I remember, and my shadow was being cast in the deer's direction was a doe, and I think it saw it and it just stopped. So the behind the shoulder shots behind the tree, and I remember holding this string at full, this bow at full draw, and I'm just trembling. I started shaking so bad all over. I could hardly had my eyes closed, just holding on like I was weightlifting. And finally, she stepped out from behind the tree, and I shot, and I hit it in the neck, and it went down. So I got lucky, but it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much you learn, and the mistakes and just the experiences of doing it. You realize how much you've learned over the years. So, but it was fun. It was all fun.
Yep. But then there's times where you make a mistake now, and you go, I can't believe it took me this long to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
The other day we were joking around. You might be a traditional bow hunter and it's funny you said that about the bow, because I said, if you can throw your bow out of a tree or something and not worry about it getting still usable when it gets to the bottom.
Yeah. Right.
So
that's a good thing.
Yeah. So what lit your fire on pursuing and collecting bear archery items?
Well, it goes back to my liking antiques. I can remember, again, going back to being out in the woods all the time. There were places where there were older farms and homesteads out there, and you'd come across the big pile of garbage that back then they just took stuff out to the back 40, I guess, and dumped it. So I can remember finding some of these piles out in the woods where we used to go, and finding old milk bottles, the old Borden's or whatever dairy. That was a big one in Michigan, but the old glass milk bottles and the ball mason jars and just whatever, just old things. And that just was always something I enjoyed. And I got wind of a traditional show. I think it was Michigan Longbow Association at the time. They had their rendezvous over by Howell Heartland area at the club that was over there at the time. So I happened to see something in maybe one of the newsletters I got or something. And I thought, I'm going to take a ride over there. It was a weekend. So I took a ride, and there's all this traditional stuff, guys. I remember a guy with the spoke shave, scraping a Osage stave down, and, guys shooting longbows and just all the booths. There were vendors there and everything. And there was a guy that was selling an old, I don't know how many he had there. I don't remember now. This was probably 93, 94, I think. He had an old bear recurve and some microflight arrows and stuff. I thought, that's pretty cool. That would be neat to hunt with something like that or shoot that. So that was my first bear bow. It was a 1969 Kodiak Hunter, I remember. And I think Frank Scott was at that show, if I remember right, because I had him sign the bow. And somewhere out there, because I got rid of it, but somewhere floating around, someone's got a 53-pound 1969 Kodiak Hunter with Frank Scott's signature on it. That was probably mine. And then I bought an old wooden arrow from one of the vendors that just had some arrows, scruff arrows there. And I got one from him because I wanted Frank Scott. I don't know how I knew Frank Scott was somebody then. I don't remember. I didn't know anything about bear archery so much, but I think I probably had heard. But anyhow, had him sign that. And then I started looking at bear things and bear archery. And Fred Bear, he was from Michigan. I kind of remembered the name growing up, and that's kind of really what started with me. And that was my first bear bow and led me into the traditional direction. So that was pretty much where it started for me. Do you
still have the arrow that Frank Scott signed?
I do still have the arrow. I do
Nice.
have the arrow. I don't have the bow, but yep, I kept the arrow. And I think it's dated 94, if I remember. That's why I remember the year that I went to that. So yeah, that did, I saved it, thankfully. I mean, I should have kept the bow too, but, I did keep the arrow, and that's a great memory when I see that, of just, I can picture being there again and just being in awe of just, wow, scraping Osage off of a stick. Like that's bow hunting. That really, sparked an interest in me and really ignited that fire. So I started picking stuff up wherever I could find it. And there were collectors then, but, I didn't even have an internet yet. So it wasn't like now where you could find things on eBay and, just so much more open to everyone. Then it was pretty limited. So I just started putting feelers out around the state because it's such a great state for bear archery stuff, and, such a rich history of archery here. So I just, got to meet other people that had the same interests, and asking around. Someone's father or uncle or grandfather had some old archery stuff, and making phone calls, and it was a lot of fun, those early days of collecting. And there were a few guys before me, but doing it, but it was really a fun start for me to some of the people I'd met. One quick story of somebody I had met. I don't know if you're familiar with Rob, but there was a guy from Flint, Michigan. His name was Erwin Ketzler, and he was a 5-time national champion. He won 5 NFAA tournaments in the 50s. And I met another old archer from the Detroit Archers, and he told me of a guy when he would go to the tournaments. This gentleman was a pretty good shooter himself, and said he remembers going to the tournaments, and there was a guy there to beat. And he goes, he was the man to beat, was Erwin. And at the end of the shoot, I guess everyone would go and get an arrow from someone as a souvenir, and he had Erwin Ketzler's arrow. It's like a foo-foo arrow, and it's signed Erwin Ketzler, Flint, Michigan, 1953.
Wow.
I got that arrow from him. So it was kind of neat. I didn't really know who he was, but once I realized who he was, they used to joke back and forth. He said, on the shooting line, and just kind of razz each other. But at that time, I had a phone book, and I looked in the phone book, and here's Erwin Ketzler's name and phone number. So I called, and he picked up the phone, and I was just in awe. I'm like, is this Erwin Ketzer? And yes, it is. And I'm like, the Erwin Ketzer? Yep. I'm like, well, 5-time national champion Erwin Ketzer? He goes, yep, that's me. And he was just the nicest, most humble guy. But we had wanted to get together, but he was sick at the time with cancer, I believe. So he was going back and forth from Flint area, which is closer to me, up to, I believe it was Houghton Lake. And then he would come back home for the weekends, or if he had to get treatment or something. But our timing never jived where we could get together. And of course he was battling some health issues. So I never did get to meet him in person, but I was just remember, I told him about the arrow, and I told him about the gentleman, Art Lindy, that the Detroit Archers, and oh yeah, I remember old Art, and just fun to hear. Could only imagine what it must have been like back then. But here I met both of these friends and these great archers and stuff from back in the day that they're gone now, and so many that I did get the chance to meet then and talk to are gone now because of just the timing, and they were big in the 30s and 40s. So by the time I got into it, a lot of them were getting up in years. So it was really fun to talk to some of those guys and hear some of the stories that they told. And it's just been really a lot of fun meeting the people as much as the stuff that I pick up. Is I've met some great people.
I would say to that, and I'm on board 100%. You look at people of certain eras that you've had a chance to meet, and they're kind of, I don't want to say magical, but it represents something so cool. But I would say that there are those people in every generation. We collectively might look at somebody from the 40s or 50s and think, oh man, they were the bomb. But you got guys in the 60s and 70s. It evolves, and we hope it continues to evolve.
Yes, yeah, for sure. The hope the interest stays there, and that was one thing I didn't know if we would touch on that, but I was thinking about today, just some of the people I've met, and there's a lot of younger guys. Not like I feel like I'm 80 years old saying that, but there's a lot of younger guys that I've become friends with, and you see on a lot of the forums and stuff that are into the collecting and bear archery in particular, but anything traditional, the older archery stuff and arrows and quivers and whatnot. But it's nice to see there are some guys picking up, running with the torch, grabbing the baton and running with it, that there is still that interest. So it's nice to kind of know that there are guys that are still interested in that. Because I can remember times back when I was at work, and I picked up a bow that I couldn't believe I got. I mean, the whole story of this could take an hour to tell, and I won't unless you want me to. But anyhow, it was a very rare Grumley takedown bow made by Fred's first Boyer Nels Grumley. It was a 2-piece old longbow I had gotten from an antique guy locally. And I remember coming home that night after getting it, and I felt like I was carrying a baby in my arms. I couldn't believe I had this beautiful bow. Talked to some other collectors, and one guy I remember in particular that had collected he said, I've been collecting 25 years. He goes, I've never even seen one. He goes, I can't believe you've gotten I know I can't believe either. And just having that bow, and I can remember bringing it to work, might have been the next day or that week or something. I had worked with some guys my age that bow hunted, and I had it on the back of my truck at lunchtime showing somebody, and they came over, what do you got? And they poked their head over, I can remember, and saw it. Oh, it's that old thing, and walked away. And I thought, geez, you realize the history that you're looking at here, but it meant nothing. So I kind of learned too that there's a lot of people that don't care about that history, and that's okay. But I learned early on at a couple things that wow, not everybody feels this passionate about this stuff as I do. It just seemed I just loved going to the Michigan Bow Hunters Rendezvous and seeing Floyd Eccleston when he was there with his display and his broadhead collection, and John Grumley with all his dad's bows and stuff set up there. And that's where I was always drawn to, was the booths that had the history, the old stuff there. So I assumed everyone felt that way, but they didn't. But it's good to know that there are still a lot of guys coming up now, and young guys that really have that passion, and that's good to know.
Well, I would say to that not everybody was cool enough to want to be Daniel Boone. And whoever looked at that old bow, they must have wanted to be Gilligan or something, not Daniel Boone.
Yeah, right. They were the nerds or something. Yeah, something. How could you not appreciate this? You bow hunt. This is such a big part of that history, that why you're able to bow hunt now. But yeah, it just didn't mean anything to them.
So it must have been a target-rich environment when you first got into collecting right there in Michigan. At that time, you didn't have eBay. You didn't have people like, thinking they had $1 million bow, or an old bow was worth $1,000. So it must have been a target-rich environment. At what point, I watched that. I watched that TV, Outdoor Michigan, that show you were on.
Michigan Out of Doors.
Michigan Out of Doors. So looking at all those Bear takedown handles, I mean. Signed by Fred Bear. You got Fred Bear's Borsalino hat, all of that. At what point did people start to call you and say, hey, you might be interested in this? At what point did you start to feel like, wow, this has gotten serious?
Wow, that's a good question, Rob.
I never hear that. Can you say that again?
That's a really good question.
Thank you.
I can't think back exactly. There was a time, again, through word of mouth, I guess you'd make the calls, but as it seems like more as computer came into play, and maybe I met more people and whatnot, that you got more people contact. The show didn't really drum up a lot more people contacting me, I wouldn't say. I still think it was more, a little bit. There's been a few that said, hey, are you the guy that did that thing and, on that show? And that was really cool. And, they might want to have a question they want to ask me, or, a couple guys, hey, I've got some things and, I don't really have a use for them, or would you be interested, or do you know what this is worth, or something. So it has opened some doors that way to new friendships and conversation. But I guess over the years, there's always been that little bit of, you put your name out there enough, or you put your interest out there enough that, no, I don't know anybody, but I might know someone that does, or my uncle or something. So there was always that chance that someone would contact you with something. But a lot of it was a lot of legwork. I just remember early on, like I said before, computers, I didn't work a lot of weekends then, mostly during the week. So weekends would come. I had a phone book, and I would look at some of these old magazines, these old archery magazines that I had, and just any paper material that I had with names and stuff, and I would just look for names in the phone book. If they were from Michigan, I mean, again, if a guy's name was John Smith, there's probably a good chance I'm not going to find him. But there were a lot of guys that had some unique names that probably feel like an Irwin Ketzler. I mean, there weren't too many Irwin Ketzlers in the phone book when I looked, from Flint, Michigan. So, I would find people that way, and I'd take the weekend. I'd see if I could come up and visit them. Hey, I got some archery stuff. Yeah, I used to shoot when I was younger. Me and my husband passed away, and I've got some stuff here. And I would just get an address and plan a trip, and take the Saturday and Sunday and go cruise Michigan. So I got to see some parts of the state that I normally wouldn't have seen, some cities and towns that I never normally would have gone to, and again, just met some great people. And sometimes it turned out to be a gold mine, and sometimes it didn't turn out to be too much at all, but it was still a fun adventure. So that's kind of how it started. And then the Footed Shaft was, aren't they one of your sponsors?
Yeah, right? Terry and Barb Bannock, yeah. The Footed Shaft, you bet.
Well, way back when, I can remember before computers, they put out a bow newsletter. I think it was once a month, and they would mail it out, and that's what everybody would start making phone calls and picking what, seeing what was on this list. And, it just depended on who got their list before others. Sometimes the guy would get his the day before, and all the bows, all the good bows were gone by the time everybody else picked them. But I can remember that was how I looked forward to going to the mailbox to find the Footed Shaft list. I still have some of those here.
Really?
And, that was just the way you did it, because, and it would just be the list of, bear bows, Kodiak bows, takedowns, quivers, arrows, accessories, however they categorized them. But that was the way, guys got wind of some stuff that was available out there. And then, it's really evolved computer-wise. I know some guys didn't like it initially with eBay and the computer thing because it kind of cut into the the flea markets, and a lot of the places guys could find stuff that once that opened up, people started learning what some of the stuff was worth, and you weren't picking up the really great stuff for really cheap anymore. Not you still could, but a lot of people got a little bit wiser before they put it out there. So it changed things a little bit, but I didn't care too much because I was working a lot at the time, and I would work overtime. And if I wanted to get something for my collection, I was fortunate enough that I could work some extra hours and maybe be able to buy something. So it was just an evolution of never thinking it would turn into what it has so far. It's been fun the whole time. So I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't have any great expectations. I never felt doing this that I'm going to make a bunch of money someday and sell all this and make a bunch of money, because and I've talked to other collectors that have said the same thing, and it's kind of, you get it because you never know. You think something's going to retain value or whatever down the road, but again, you get further away from that era. And I've mentioned the name Fred Bear to several young bow hunters, and they looked at me cross-eyed and, oh, I've heard the name.
Yeah.
So they don't even know who Fred Bear is, let alone Nels Grumley or Glenn St. Charles or Saxton Pope or some of these other huge, guys in archery history. They haven't heard of them. It's just not something they've heard of. So it can go both ways. And so again, it's nice that there's still some young guys that are carrying the baton and are interested in that history. So
drilling down a little bit, let's talk about Fred Bear as an inventor. Jumping, I'm going to jump way forward, but I'm really interested in the how he came up with the takedown. His, the very unique to this day. Is there anybody that uses that system? I mean, where you have no tools, because it would seem to me that patent has got to be expired. Don't they expire?
Oh, they can redo them again. I imagine Bear probably keeps that patent up, because otherwise I would think someone else would have something similar. But
how did he come up with that?
The only other, I don't know. I knew some people that worked at Bear. I know some people, I should say, some that worked in the bow department that worked on that platform with him. I just think, my thought and what I've kind of heard, you think of the timing, there were takedown bows prior to this system. The early, you probably saw in that Michigan Outdoors thing, the Grumley takedowns are just simple latch, or they had a hinge actually, then some that you could just fold the bow in half to transport if you were traveling. But Fred was doing a lot of traveling most of his hunting career, his hunting life, and I think he just wanted something that was easier to transport and could take on the plane with him. Probably at the time, you just slide it under your seat, but something that was easy to transport. And there are I know some bows now, like a long bows, that will come apart in the grip. You can, they slide together like a tube or whatever. So there's other takedowns in that respect. And then the 3-piece takedowns, most of them that I know, require some sort of, tool to disassemble. Now, maybe you can get the limb bolts with the antler burn. You don't need a tool, which is great. But I have a bow here that's it's a 2-piece. It was a 1963 Kodiak Magnum. It'd really be something if you could see it. But I got from a gentleman that worked in the bow department in research and development, and it was there before I think he started working there. So this was something Fred started hunting with his 3-piece takedowns, I think, in like around 67, 68. They didn't come out in the catalog till 1970. But he was field testing, and I've got some pictures of him with a couple game he had taken. But this one particular bow, the bottom limb and part of the riser separates from the rest of the riser and the upper limb, and there's one bolt that you have to unbolt, and it was marked. The bow was marked experimental, and inside that joint, when you take the limb off there, it says Groves patent pending, written in by hand in there, which there was Groves made bows, and I'm not real familiar with them. Other guys have looked at this and said, oh, that kind of looks like a Groves. So it was another other people were messing with takedowns, but I think this was a 1963 bow. And that was before, Fred started messing around with the 3-piece takedown ones. And some of the bows, the risers I do have here are some very early, I would say, prototype or definitely pre-production hand-forged latches and sockets and stuff for the guys at Bear. Fred, one of the gentlemen had told me that Fred always wanted a true takedown bow, not a take-apart bow, but a true takedown bow that required no tools. And I think of him traveling, imagine any of us traveling, going out of the country, going anywhere, going to Africa, and you lose the wrench that you put your bow together with or take it apart, especially putting it together. You get there and you lost the wrench. That puts a whole new twist on your hunting adventure. So I think Fred just wanted something that, I know he wanted something that didn't require tools, and they came up with this socket design on these takedowns, and it's just such a wonderful idea. 3 different length handles and 3 different length limbs, so you really had a lot of options of what you wanted to, what you could do with these bows, from a longer target bow with light limbs to a short hunting bow that you could hunt out of a tree or out of a blind with. So, and several weights depending what limbs you wanted. And then if you broke a limb, you get another set of limbs, you still got a bow. Where with a lot of the 2-piece ones, if you broke a limb, you don't have a bow anymore. So it really was a great idea that they came up with at Bear there. Those guys, that they had such talented people working for him up in Grayling and down in Florida too, in Gainesville. But back in those early days, you think this little town up in Michigan, but I met some people that worked for him that were just unbelievable craftsmen, and he really surrounded himself with some talent. And that's part of the reason I think some of those bows are so collectible. That's the really works of art when you see them and think about that.
Well, for the 70s, I can't imagine that many people were traveling. So I can't. I just wonder, was it marketed? Was the takedown marketed more as interchangeable, limb weights, stuff like that? Because man, I don't think wasn't a lot of international travel, even flying across the country. That wasn't a big deal then.
Yeah, but I think he was thinking about it prior to that for himself. But even if you're not traveling, what a great idea!
Oh, I mean,
you get one handle, and you can do whatever you want with it. If you want with the different lengths of limbs, and even with just that one handle section, or if you really like that length or that handle section, that riser section, that's your main part. The feel is always going to be the same, but you can change the limbs out to make it lighter or heavier. So, just a great idea, I think. And that was the bow he hunted with right up until he passed away. His takedown bow, I'm sure over the years, but that was for the bow of choice.
Yeah, backing up. We're not doing this in chronological order, that's for sure. But backing up to the 59 Kodiak? It seems to be like, for me, a guy standing on the sidelines here, it seems to be like those are the two most popular. Is the Bear Takedown and the 59 Kodiak. Coming into the 59 Kodiak, what made that bow so special? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this would just be my opinion, I guess. But I'm talking to other collectors. I mean, first of all, you look at one, and it's just gorgeous. I mean, back then they used some beautiful rosewood in the risers that I don't even know if you can get anymore. I mean, at the time, you could get woods that are protected now, but they're just such a beautiful bow. It was the first year that they had the coin in the bows, so that really added a little touch of class to that riser. To see that little copper bear emblem in there, it's such a, I don't know, it just does something to you. You get the excitement just as a collector, it does, but that was such a neat marketing thing again, and that was the first year that they started doing that. But it was just such a beautiful bow. The colors of the glass. Prior to that, most of the bows, I mean, at least the Kodiaks and stuff, they were maple that they probably got from the North Woods of Michigan, hard rock maple. So a lot of their bows were pretty simple for the most part. Maybe some of the Kodiak specials had a little fancier stuff on them, but for the most part, they were maple and brown glass maybe, or not real fancy. But the 59, just the lines, the graceful riser, the leather side plate, the leather grip, the brown glass, the orange glass on the other side, it just had that fall look to it that you just want to take that bow in the woods. And of course, Fred with the little Delta hunt that he went on, that was in 59, and they all, were shooting those bows. It's just such a big part of Bear's history. I don't know what made that one. I mean, I do know, but I don't know. Of all the Bear bows, there's so many nice ones, but that's one that for sure gets a lot of attention from a lot of people. But it's just a beautiful bow. They had, and you look at some of the ones, I've got some here with the maple sight window. They had maple sight windows. You get rosewood, which you don't see a lot of, but just beautiful bow, and purple heart. And they just such a beautiful combination of woods together with the style and everything, and they shoot great. So there's not a whole lot not to like about them.
Yeah, I think again, from looking on the sidelines, from what little I know, it seems to me like that was a fairly high performing bow for its time. I mean, like very efficient.
Yeah, I would say, I know guys shooting them now, older ones, even say that, they shoot great. They still do. So yeah, for the time, I mean, there were probably, I think I've talked to some guys that shoot a lot more than I do, Rob. Like I said, I spent a lot of my time working and collecting more than I did shooting, but I've talked to some guys that do a lot of shooting, and whether they have a range in their basement set up for year round or whatever. But a lot of guys have said that the 55, 56, 57 Kodiaks are some really fast shooting bows, not just about the speed, of course, just snappy shooters. But you look at them, a lot of them have just fine limbs, and the limb tips are so small that they're really great shooters. They said, guys have told me they've shot them against modern recurves, and they said that the old Bears outshot them. So there were bows prior to that I think probably shot, a little snappier, I guess would be the word for it. But the 59, yeah, it's a great shooting bow, and it's got the looks to go with it. So there's not much not to like about it, I guess.
No, and then moving in, talking about broadheads a little bit. He was like, his broadheads were revolutionary for the time, right? Was he the first one to be using bleeder blades? Can you talk a little bit about the Bear Razorheads? There you go, Brian, Kevin. I said it. I got to go to the league tonight though, so it's a dry Bear Razorhead.
Yeah, I don't. I think there were some other heads prior to the Bear Razorhead with the bleeder blade. I know there was a Zwicky that was slotted, an old Zwicky head. I don't know, 50 something. That was, and I'm not a broadhead guy, so Gene would probably he's probably cringing if he's going to hear this, Gene Hopkins. But they had one, and they did have a big, they called it an airplane bleeder blade. That was this big, wide steel blade that just went in the slot of this Zwicky head, and that was the bleeder blade. But eventually, Fred used to get heads when he started out in Detroit before 56, when the bubblehead, the first Bear Razorheads came out to the public. He bought heads from Zwicky he used in Roy Case in Wisconsin. He would buy the components or complete broadheads, and a lot of the early Bear arrows have heads on them, and some other manufacturers that before Fred came up with his own head, he'd use a lot of these other ones on his arrows. But the Bear Razorhead came out, I think they were working on that around 55, and that supposedly there was like 300 of them that were made, that Fred gave them to friends to try out. So, he'd do that often with bows and anything, give them to his hunting buddies, say, here, try this out, let me know what you think. And there was about 300 of these, I understand, that he had made and gave out to friends to try out, and that was the beginning of the Bear Razorhead. It was Ed Hinkle was the gentleman's name that initially came up with the Bear Razorhead. And I think Fred bought the patent from him or whatever, but he developed that head, and it's just a classic look. It's just such a beautiful broadhead, in my opinion. Again, I'm not a broadhead guy. Gene will laugh again, but there's most of the time I see so many broadheads and collections, and a lot of them are just, some are real eye catchers, and others I could care less about. They just don't do it for me. But how many ways can you make a broadhead and make it work? But the Bear Razorhead to me just is such a beautiful design, and it's stood the test of time. It's taken a lot of game animals over the years, and there's a lot of guys that are still using the old green Bear Razorheads. There's a lot of them floating around out there, and a lot of guys still use them and still like them. I know they're easy to sharpen. They're a great head. It's a great design.
First off, I'll say that anybody listening that, has some free time, you're working from home, you do yourself a favor and purchase the Fred Bear DVD. Well, I guess DVD players are going by the wayside. I don't know how you.
And isn't that sad?
Yeah, I don't know how.
Weird?
So how else you're going to get them? But Bear Archery or Fred Bear DVD collection. There's one of those DVDs in there that shows some of the equipment that Fred designed to make those broadheads. You know what I'm talking about? That machine.
The machine. I think they called it the Green Monster, if I remember.
Can you imagine how coming up with that? That is amazing piece of equipment.
Yeah, they show it doing all its different stages of the heads going through there, and the ferrules, and putting the blades on, and painting them and grinding them. And I heard that they would have issues with that quite often, but there were some guys that worked there and worked on that machine that could get it running again, get it fixed. But I also heard a gentleman that worked at Bear, that I became friends with him, but he had told me he remembers taking buckets of Bear Razorheads out behind the plant. And Fred's house was next door to the factory in Grayling. So in between the two, he said he remembers them burying buckets of these green Razorheads that, they had a run where something wasn't right. And, the blade maybe wasn't mounted correctly to the ferrule, or it didn't weld properly or whatever. So he said there were buckets of them. If everyone wanted to go looking. And I actually had permission from a gentleman that lived in Fred's house, that owned Fred's house. He was a dentist before the current owner. And I had my display set up one year at the old Bear Museum in Grayling. And he came through and looked, and we got talking, and I told him about that story. And I have it somewhere, but one of his business cards, he had written on the back and said, anytime you want to come metal detecting or whatever in the yard, you have my permission. And I never did. Unfortunately, I was working a lot of hours and didn't have a metal detector, and I don't know how good the heads would be anyhow if I did find them after being buried for so long. But just interesting that they trashed a lot of heads that just weren't done right. So part of the manufacturing process, I guess. Yeah. But somewhere over there's a bunch of old broadheads buried. So don't go digging up the guy's yard now. You might get arrested.
Well, I will go back to the DVD set. So any of you guys out there that don't have a DVD player, I'm pretty sure you can find one in a secondhand store at this point, pretty cheap.
Yeah,
but
that's what I did.
Yeah, the Footed Shaft, I know that they sell that DVD compilation. I've had 2 whole sets that I've lent to people, and I've never found again. I'm going to keep my DVD player. But
I still watch them myself. I still have them, and they're great.
Yeah, you talk about early hunting videos, and there's just so much damn enjoyment in that little plastic case. To see his Kodiak hunts, grizzlies, a mule deer, just the whole dang thing is, rainy Saturday or something, off season. It's just a blast to watch.
And I remember guys talking about seeing Fred Bear when he used to be on the American Sportsman or some local Michigan outdoor shows. It was common when Fred was around for them to run some of these movies on there. And I can remember talking to some guys that remember growing up and watching those movies. I can imagine, like you said, on a Saturday or a Thursday evening or whenever it was going to run, and sitting back and watching this guy in the Borsalino hat, hunting all these animals with his bow and arrow. I mean, what a great thing then, and it's still, like you said, it's great to watch him now, and it's just it's endearing to all of us, I guess. It's just, we all want to feel like Fred Bear when we're out there, and they are some great films. I've still got a bunch of the old video cassettes that I bought I was just thinking I got to put those out there and see if anybody would be interested in buying those, because I do have DVD player, video cassette players on VCR.
Yeah.
But I think I've got 2 sets of those on the big VCR tapes. That thinking, what in the world am I going to do with these? If I hang on to them long enough, maybe they'll be worth more than they are now. But yeah, now the DVDs are going by the wayside. So
I don't
know where it all.
I have a whole set of the VCR ones too. I've had 2 sets of the DVDs, and I'm really mad at myself because I cannot remember who I lent the second one out to. It's out there.
Yeah, someone's enjoying it. They don't want to. They conveniently forgot to give it back to you.
Suckers. So yeah,
they're still available though. You can still pick them up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Terry and Barb over at the Footed Shaft have them. So what is your favorite? What's your most prized bow that you have there, or riser, or limb set, or?
Gosh, I guess that's kind of hard, but maybe kind of not. Of course, my most favorite, and probably one of my more recent ones, is of course Fred Bear's takedown bow. I mean, it's funny amongst some of the collectors when I'd first gotten that, and there's so many guys that love collecting the takedowns, and as well as myself. And like I say, I've got some of those early pre-production ones and everything. But to have Fred's last hunting bow that he signed to himself, you see videos of him, pictures of him with this bow in his hand. That's just, to me, is just, these guys would call it the Holy Grail. And that's kind of how, I chuckle at it, but it really kind of is. There's so many beautiful takedowns out there, but if there's one out there that's really special, I'd say that's one of them.
And
that's probably one of my favorites.
Is that a B handle?
It's a B handle, yep. B handle with number 1 limbs, and that makes a 60-inch bow. And most of the Kodiaks Fred hunted with prior to the takedown were 60-inch bows. That's evidently the length he preferred. But this is, it's a B handle. I guess he liked that best.
How many pounds?
And, left-handed, so I can't shoot it. It's funny. These are the limbs that are on it are 50-pound limbs. Yeah. But I know Fred, prior to that, shot heavier. He was, known to shoot 70 pounds,
that's what I
65
thought.
Pounds.
Yeah.
But I have a really neat little article here that I found in an old bow hunting magazine. Not that old, but the back page is called Trail's End, and it was by Jim Doherty. And it's a story that he wrote, and it's just a page. There's a little drawing, I think it was from a photograph, but of him sitting on a stump. But he's talking about Charlie Kroll, who was Fred's son-in-law, at Grouse Haven. And Jim's talking about being there with Fred, and Jim was a left-hander himself, and him and Fred were talking, and he said Fred told him he got talking about Fred's bow, and he told Jim, why don't you take it for a walk in the woods? It doesn't get out much anymore. He goes, just don't embarrass it. Kind of jokingly let Jim take it out for a hunt at Grouse Haven. And he talks about that, and he talks about the inscription on the bow where it says, Happy Hunting Fred Bear, 1972. And he mentions the limbs are 50-pound limbs, because as Fred got older, he dropped down in weight and everything. So it's kind of neat to have that story and then have the bow, and it's got 50-pound limbs, because you didn't hear of Fred shooting that light of weight too often, at least in the stories and the promotional pictures. When he shot his elephant, it was a 65-pound Kodiak or a 70-pound Kodiak. So he did shoot heavier bows, but this one had 50-pound limbs in it, and that's what's in it right now. So those are the limbs Fred was using. Well, gosh, he was 70, 80 some years old at the time, so that's pretty good. If you can, still pull a bow at all at 50-pound limbs, that's pretty good. So
2 things. Now, number 1, that handle is, I think, if I recall, is that maple? Is that the maple handle?
Yeah, I believe that at that time with the future wood, what they were doing at Bear, it was maple, and it was impregnated with the future wood. I don't know, it was an epoxy or some kind of mixture that they, impregnated. I don't know if it was under pressure or how they did the process. But yeah, it's rock maple, pretty faded. This one looks like it's pretty faded. It's probably seen daylight and seen some use, which is kind of neat. Both the little brown bears that are normally on the latches are gone, are broken off. They're pretty fragile for, most guys are probably pretty careful. Those, but both of them are gone on Fred's bow. And there's a spot was interesting when I got this, and a couple people I've talked to are familiar with it. There's 3 plugged holes in the front of the riser. And when I first got it, it almost looks like the 3 holes on like a target bow, a Tamerlane target bow or something, where they had the Omni Jeffrey bow sight. But I thought, man, Fred never shot a sight. I wonder what that is. Not thinking, but I showed it to a buddy of mine. He looked at the bow when he was here, and Neil Bice the third had seen it at Kalamazoo a couple of years ago, and he said he remembers his dad, who worked with Fred, bringing that bow to him to repair, because you can see in the riser section of the grip, Fred cut his bows down pretty small. His shelf, this bow is pretty narrow, and the shelf sits right down on your hand, so he took a lot of mass out of that handle, and I think it was a lot of stress on that area of the bow, and the laminations and areas of the grip started to separate. So Neil said he remembers fixing that bow, and I think they drilled holes in it, ran some screws through there to draw all the pieces back together, and then filled them. He said back then he remembers you couldn't see the filled holes, but now over the years of age and everything, you can make out where the plugs are. But yeah, it's pretty interesting to note that. And the gentleman that I told you that worked at Bear on the takedown bows, I remember him telling me a story of Fred bringing his bows in there and wanting to shave them, shave the grip down and shave the shelf down. And he told Fred at one point, Fred, he goes, I don't know, you're taking an awful lot of wood out of there. I don't think you're going to put a lot. And Fred said, don't worry about it. And he said, when Fred tells you that's what he wants, that's what you do. So it's just the way Fred wanted his. And you look at all of his bows; they're all have a real small grip, and shelf sits real low on the hand. So this is what Fred wanted, and he didn't care. His guys were telling him, yeah, you might be putting a little extra stress there, and it's kind of evident in this one. But he must have liked this bow an awful lot to want to have it fixed and keep shooting it. So it's kind of neat. So that would be my favorite. If I had to pick one right now, that would probably be one of them. There's just so many beautiful bows, and over the years in different eras and different ones I have for different reasons, stories of how I got them. But that one for sure is the holy grail for me.
Now you mentioned it's left-handed and you're right-handed, and you said, so I can't shoot it. Would you shoot it if you were left-handed?
I think I would. I would have to want to try to shoot it.
Oh heck yeah.
Just to do it. It's 50-pound limbs, maybe even put some lighter ones, but you're taking a chance. People thought I was crazy years ago. I strung up and shot some Grumley bows, some late 30s, early 40s Grumley Osage longbows that I thought I was crazy too. But I had so many at one point, not a gazillion, but I had enough in my collection and in displays that I thought, again, going back to, man, this would be so cool to hunt with a Detroit era Osage longbow made by Nels Grumley. So I bought one year. I had it at Kalamazoo again. I was at one of the trad shows and was walking around with it, asking. I didn't know. I'm not that knowledgeable about self bows and stuff like that anyhow. So some guys were looking at it, and I told them what I wanted to do. I have a short draw, so I don't have a real long draw, if that's going to make a difference for overstressing it. There's always a chance that a bow could break. Even new bows can break. So it was always a chance. I always felt I wasn't doing it for attention or trying to whatever. Something I wanted to do. And I thought, I'm going to take that chance, and I'm going to string one and shoot one. And I hunted with one year. I actually shot over a nice doe with an old Grumley bow and some old Detroit cedar arrows and everything one year. And just recently I was shooting out in the backyard with an old Grumley, and I had a left-handed Grumley bow that a good friend of mine is a left-hander. So we were talking. I forgot I had that one. I said, hey, I got this one here. He took it out of the display case, strung it up, and we were both out in the backyard shooting Grumley bows, and they shot beautiful.
Huh.
So yeah, it's a really unbelievable feeling to hold something like that in your hand and fling an arrow with one. Your whole mind just goes back to that era, and it's just amazing that they're still functional. So yeah, I would probably give Fred's a whirl if I could shoot left-handed, but I'd be awfully awkward.
Well, he did tell, who did he tell not to embarrass it? So if you're a right-hander and you pick that up trying to shoot left-handed,
I would definitely embarrass it. So, it's just, it hangs on the wall. I have a print underneath it called The Gentleman Woodsman by Pat Marino. He did several photographs years ago of some stuff. He did one of Glenn St. Charles, some of the prominent archers, and he did this one called The Gentleman Woodsman with a bunch of stuff of Fred Bear's laid out from the museum at the time, and this bow is in the picture. So it's kind of neat to see it, there in the picture with the inscription and everything. And just knowing that was Fred's hunting bow, it's just really a special feeling, I guess.
What about arrows? You collect many arrows, and there's one particular arrow that I'm thinking of. What kind of cool arrows do you have? Do you collect a lot of the old bear arrows?
I do have some old bear arrows. Some in box sets. That's been a big thing lately on some of the forums. I just picked up a set, like you were talking about. Someone had another collector had actually gave me a heads up on these. He wasn't local, and he saw these arrows on Craigslist. So the guy was a little closer to me, so I ended up contacting him, and we met up, and I got him just a beautiful set of 1960 bear arrows in the box. They're like brand new, just beautiful. So I have some other complete sets of arrows that are in boxes for display and stuff. But I do have some personal arrows of Fred's that are, I don't know if that's what you were thinking of, something like that. I do have other arrows. Again, I'm not a big broadhead arrow collector like Gene and some other collectors have unbelievably fantastic collections of vintage arrows from some prominent archers. I have some, but not a lot. But I do have some personal arrows of Fred's that are very special. I've got one that he killed a grizzly bear with in British Columbia in 1965, and that's on one of the DVDs you were talking about. If you watch, I think it's called, what's it called? Grizzly
North something? Is it North Country?
Gosh, I'm forgetting right now. It's on the one with the mule deer.
Yeah.
I think a polar bear.
Yeah.
And then the grizzly.
He stalks in.
I can't think of.
Yeah, he stalks in on the grizzly while it's feeding. And then he whistles.
I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, he whistles.
Yeah, well,
and
the
the
first
bear.
shot he missed.
Yeah, and he throws his bow into the brush.
Throws his bow down. He goes, "You believe I missed that?" I can hear him and his guide.
Yeah.
He goes, "Yeah, but you don't get him staying." Fred, I think he'll be back. And you think so? And yeah, the second time he's putting the stalk on, you can see he's minus, I think, one arrow in his quiver, but he pulls an arrow out of there, and as he's stalking and then makes the shot, that's the arrow that I have. That arrow, he gave it to Doug Walker, who was a good friend of his and was a bear dealer over on the west coast. And it's I got it from an estate when Doug had passed. They had an estate sale of a lot of his items, and this was one of the things that was there. So it's documented in a biography of Doug Walker, and he talks about Fred giving him that arrows for helping him on, I guess, with the filming or whatever with that. But there's a 1966 archery magazine that shows Fred on the cover with that grizzly bear, and then there's which I was really neat to see, an article inside that issue, and it shows that arrow on top of a stump that the ABC cameraman, the crew from ABC American Sportsman, put on this stump with a sign that it was shot by Fred Bear. So that's it. The arrow is signed by Fred Bear. It's got American Sportsman TV on it. Stevens Lake, British Columbia, 1965. So that's the arrow when you watch that film. And then later when you see Fred and his guide go up to the bear after it's down and they're talking, you can see at one point where his guide or whatever moves the bear, and you can see the bent arrow sticking out of the other side of the bear. And this arrow's got the bend in it still and everything. It's still got grizzly bear blood on it. So that's a pretty cool arrow
Yeah.
to have, just to have the film of Fred shooting that arrow, and makes it even more special. Any arrow of Fred's would be special to me, but that one is really, really cool that he shot a grizzly
story.
with it. You can watch him do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. And that's pretty decent footage if you think about that time frame. It's actually pretty decent footage, and the audio is pretty amazing. You can hear him whistle.
Yep.
You hear Fred whistle.
You can hear him breathing.
Oh, you can hear the bear. Yep.
No, I'm talking about Fred. You can hear
can
Fred when he's stalking. Listen to that next time you watch it. I always find that part neat. When he's stalking, you can hear at one point, just before he's going to shoot, he stopped, and you can hear him. Like,
I thought that was the
bear.
bear.
Feel his excitement. Yeah, I mean, he's that close to a freaking grizzly bear, so you can hear it in Fred's breathing that his adrenaline's going. So that's, and I there's a tape of that. I don't know if you've ever heard it, Rob, but I don't, if it's Fred, I don't remember. It's on a video or an audio cassette tape. I think I have it on, but he talks about that hunt when they had the film crew. Imagine the film crew then compared to now.
Oh gosh.
Think of the timing, like you said, these huge shoulder cameras you hold on your shoulder, but they had platforms built around this site where Fred was filming. They had, I know at one point they said they had cables running across that trail for sound where you can hear the bear and whatever. And I guess at some time during the night, a bear or something must have walked across the trail and unplugged the cable. So they had to go back and crawl back up there and plug the cable back together so they had sound. And just imagine what it must have took. It's hard enough, but they had guys in platforms and just the camera crews and stuff around there to get that footage. But yeah, next time you watch that, or anybody that's listening, I always found that part neat, where just before he shoots, you can hear him breathing. You can hear Fred breathing. And it's like, man, you can feel the excitement in him and watch that arrow fly and everything. It's pretty cool.
One more thing. I want to talk about Fred, the person. One thing that I find interesting, and it's not uncommon. I mean, it's not unique to Fred, but it's been, how many years since he's passed, and I see things that are attributed to Fred. Well, I'll use an example. Somebody made the comment a few weeks ago. They were a little irritated with my show and said, this guy has done more for traditional archery than Fred Bear. And I'm thinking, you could have just let me think you were dumb and not open your mouth and assured me that you were dumb, because, we're talking, it was not traditional archery. It was archery. So there's instances where I hear people using Fred Bear or attributing things to him. What do you think, as a collector looking back at his past, how would you describe Fred?
In what sense?
Well, for me, he was an innovator. He was an inventor. He was a salesman. It wasn't so much.
Everything you're saying, is definitely how I look at him, and it's been said. I mean, you look at bow hunters that have gone before him. I said that in that Michigan Out of Doors thing, and again, that was one of the parts I wish I could have maybe redone, but just the way it came out, something Frank Scott had said. But basically, there were others before Fred, and I think I said in there that they did it more for themselves. I don't know if that was what I meant to say or what the meaning, but Fred promoted it. Fred did a lot for the sport, a lot of what he did. And like you said, he was a salesman, an inventor. Everything he did, it wasn't just to make a name for himself. He did a lot. He held 13 patents that he didn't protect, from what I understand. A bow quiver, unidirectional glass. I mean, the shooting glove. So many things that he patented that he just, if it bettered the sport and bettered the business for anybody, he felt it was good, and that's different than a lot of people would be. It wasn't so much other people did it just for themselves, Saxton Pope, whatever. It was a different era and different reasonings they were doing things, but Fred really was one to take it to a business point. Of course, his name was on all this stuff, so that was part of it too. But he was a shrewd guy, and he had the love for this early on in his life, from working at, car manufacturing plants to, he wanted to make, he met Art Young, and that lit his fire, and look what he did with it, from a basement in a corner of a building to what bear archery became. I mean, he knew what he was doing. He could disarm, you read in some of the books, he could disarm anti-hunters. They met him with every intention of skewering him and, making him look bad, and they'd walk away with a whole nother perspective after talking to him, because he wasn't this big, bad, bloodthirsty killer that, people wanted to make him out to be. So it's really neat that he was a good ambassador for sound game management, everything. It's just, he definitely, to me, what you said, he means that to me as far as that. And he's endearing to me because he's, most of his history was here in Michigan. And again, that's kind of why I've stuck mostly with the Michigan-related stuff in my collection, and primarily bear archery, I always say, because there's so much stuff out there, and I don't have the room, I don't have the capacity, I don't have whatever to just, I didn't want to just have all this stuff to say I'm a collector and just have all this wonderful stuff. And I'm not knocking it for anyone that does, but for me and what direction my collecting went, I found myself just leaning more towards the Michigan related stuff, because I am a proud Michigander, and I'm proud to be from here. There's been a lot of, great things to come from Michigan. It was a huge state for hunting, and, Fred was so big where he started out was here. So I just felt I wanted to just honor him in my collecting for the most part, Michigan related. So it's made it easier for me because I don't have so much stuff, but, wonderful stuff from a guy that to me influenced so many people. And there were other great archers before him, like I said, but Fred really most people really, for some reason, love the bear archery stuff. Well, he's just made a big impact on a lot of people. So
yeah, I think that he was the perfect mix at the perfect time. The inventor, that his love for the outdoors, and he seemed like, such a humble, genuinely caring person, just all the way around. It was, but I see him attributed. Some people attribute things to him that I don't really think that's the correct way of thought, but I could be wrong. Right. I just wanted your take on it. So he did have big feet. Now tell me, you told me a quick story about his foot size.
Yeah, this was again 90% or whatever of the enjoyment of collecting, what I've done for the past 25 plus years, is not just the bows and things you get, but the people I've met, other collectors, just people that I've gone to their homes, like I said, to get archery items or maybe see what they had, and just met some of the most wonderful people. And I've met quite a few people that worked for Fred in Grayling. I never met Fred myself personally, so I've met him through those that did know him. And there was one lady that worked at Bear, her and her husband both, since the 50s. She was there on and off, having kids and whatnot, but I got to know her later on after she had left there, and wonderful lady. Lois was her name. We'll just leave it at her as her first name. And I went to her home one weekend when I was out running around, and I think I had the kids that weekend. I don't remember, but my kids used to go with me and the wife, so they might have been with me, but I don't remember. But anyhow, we were at her house, and she told me a story when she worked at Bear, when she first started working there. And you got to keep in mind, she's in her 80s now, so here's this wonderful 80-year-old woman in her little house in her rocking chair with her doilies on the table and everything. And she's telling me about when she first went there, when she was first started working there, she worked in the leather department. She was in a little cubicle area. I guess people that have been in the plant would know better, but a little cubicle area, where they had little kind of offices, makeshift offices, where people had desks and whatnot. And she was in there with some other ladies that she knew that worked there, that probably worked in the leather department, but they were all chatting like girls tend to do, and guys, but this was the ladies. And some of the girls were saying, what they say about guys with big feet talking about Fred evidently, because he did have a size 14 shoe, I believe. And they all started giggling and whatever. And this Lois said she turned and looked, and in the door of the little cubicle, there's Fred standing there with a smile on his face. And he winked at her and left. And she said, I was so embarrassed. I just started working there, and he's hearing us talk like this. I was so embarrassed. I turned 50 shades of red. And I guess the next day she came into the office, and Fred had put one of his shoes on the table, the desk in the office. So his sense of humor, I have heard more than once, was he was quite the jokester. So that's just one of the stories I got to hear firsthand from someone that worked there, that to this day, when you'd have to picture her to really appreciate it, but you can kind of get the gist. But this little old lady just telling me this story about Fred and his big feet, so I thought that was cute. And it's one of the favorite things of the 25 plus years of collecting. That's something that is stuck in my mind. I've forgotten way more than I remember, but that's one thing that I'll always remember. So it was cute.
That's good.
I got to tell you another quick story, Rob, if
Yeah.
I can. It's not just, this was another one that Art Lindy I had told you about, that was with Detroit Archers, and he knew Fred real well. I actually have an arrow from him real quick, just to kind of, he was good friends with Fred and knew him. When they were experimenting with the potted arrows, the poison pod back in the 60s, I got an arrow from Art that Fred had wanted him. He supplied the arrows. It's a aluminum arrow, a beautiful bear arrow with a bear razor head on it with a pod behind it. He wanted this Art to shoot a deer, make a bad hit on a deer, because he was working with the DNR, or the Michigan, DNR at the time, about, they were thinking about maybe legalizing these pods. So he wanted Art to make a bad shot on this deer. He said the first time he shot one, of course, he made a perfect hit, because he couldn't intentionally make a bad hit, but the second one he did. And anyhow, I've got that arrow, and it was neat to have Art tell me the story that he worked on that through Fred. But Art had told me a story that this was back in the day, him, and there was a president of Detroit Archers at the time. His name was John Kelly, and his wife was Mary Kelly. And I have photographs of these people. So again, when I look at these pictures now, Mary looked like this mischievous young lady anyhow, just the twinkle in her eye when I look at these old pictures. I'm talking from the 40s. But Art had told me one time they were I don't know if they were out on a hunt or something, but they were out on a canoe or a boat with her husband, Art, maybe his wife, and they were just out at night on a rowboat. And they had been partying a little bit, of course. They probably had a couple cocktails, and they get out in the water, and this Mary tells them, we got to go back. I got to go to the bathroom. And John, I guess, her husband and Art were like, we're not going back. Just hang it over the boat. She goes, I can't do that. It's too quiet. I can't. So I guess they said, I don't care. We ain't going back. So she ended up hanging her butt over the end of the boat, but they had to smack their oars on the water to make some noise. So they couldn't hear her going to the bathroom, I guess. So again, it's another one of those stories. So when I look at pictures of her, and she has this sheepish little grin in one of the photographs I have, I just instantly think of that story. It's just so funny. I just, some of the times those guys must have had, but that was another one of those kind of cute stories of back then.
Not to get all nostalgic, but you tell a story like that, and you really think about a big part of traditional archery even today is the people. I mean, it's a great community.
Absolutely.
And
it really is.
Yeah, it is so much to do with the people.
And tournaments were so big back then. And you just imagine, and there were archers, but when I've met some of these people that I've met over the years, some have told me, I know one gentleman that was local said the son, his dad was big in archery, again, knew Fred Bear real well. And he said every weekend my dad packed me and my brother and my mom, had, picnic lunch and whatever. He goes, we were going to a tournament somewhere every weekend. That was just what you did. And that was what he did as, he remembers as a family doing that. So the nostalgia part of it, but it was just a great community. And like Art said about Erwin Ketzer, these guys were just buddies. I could just picture them razzing each other on the line. They were both very good archers, but I remember Art saying Irwin was the guy to beat. He was the guy. So here, he's giving accolades to his competitor, which is nice in this world where everyone now, where so many people want to talk other people down and talk bad about people. It's nice to, hear these guys giving each other, it's just fun. It just seemed like a fun community. And I've said that myself, the traditional community, in all the years I've been collecting, I've met so many wonderful people and made some great friends and stuff, that they really are a unique class of people. Happy to be a small part of it.
No. And, whether people realize it or not, guys like you, guys like Gene Hopkins, we owe you guys a debt of gratitude to carry on and to kind of document the history, because it is, whether people realize it or not, it is important.
Yeah.
So my hat's off to
sad.
you.
Well, thank you, Rod. Appreciate it. And I know Gene does, and I've said that about guys before I was collecting. When I think of Floyd Eccleston and John Grumley and others that set up displays at all the archery events and drag this stuff around, I've done it before, and I've done it with a lot more stuff than I'm hoping to do now. Still some great displays and stuff, but there's a point where it's just the amount of work that goes into that. And I had one on that note, really, I just remember, and it's always stuck in my mind. I did a show in a small high school in a kind of an obscure town here in Michigan. A principal of the school there had seen a display I'd set up in Grayling one year, and he asked if I would be interested in setting up a display they're having. It was their first or second annual outdoor show at the school in this town. And I said, yeah, I was excited to want to display this stuff. I've always enjoyed setting it up and having other people enjoy it. Like I said, I always did when I went to these shows. So I did. It was in the winter. My kid, my son, my daughter, and my daughter's boyfriend went with me. So we had two vehicles because I was pulling a trailer with my truck, and it's cold and snowy, driving across the state, set this booth up. And the next day, people were coming through, and there was it wasn't a very big show. There weren't a lot of people there. It was really like a local thing. And people had different booths set up of different things. But I remember I had a pretty neat display set up of just some history. And an older lady came walking through, and she was looking at it. She goes, "Is this all yours?" And so, yeah, she goes, "Can I ask you, are you selling anything?" Or I go, "No, not really." She goes, "Are they paying you to do this?" I go, "No, not really." She goes, "Why are you doing that?" And I just remember telling, because I enjoy, the history and enjoy people seeing it, but it made me think, why do we want to do this, I guess. But that's what drives me. And I know that's what drives Gene and countless other collectors is, you're not making money at it. I mean, you hope maybe you might get put up in a hotel room or cover the cost of a booth or something to help defer. But really, it's not like you're going to set up to sell your wares for the most part. It's just history you're sharing. So I just remember her saying that and thinking, why am I doing this? But, the next day we packed it all back up and drove back home and unloaded it. And it's like, man, but it's when you see people like yourself and others that enjoy it and appreciate it, that's what makes it worth it. That there are still those that do enjoy it. So that's
cool.
I feel like Floyd back then when, he would set up his booth and the people coming to see all that history. It was just, I was in awe of it. I wish he was still here. It was fun. He was a old time collector, friend of Fred's. I don't know if you're familiar with the Floyd Eccleston or not, but he was an old timer. He had a beautiful archery shop / museum up in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, and he'd set up his booth, and it was fun. Great to see. He again, we grabbed the baton from him, and there will be others that will take it after us. So that's good. Good to see the interest.
Well, that's awesome. I appreciate your time, John.
Well, I appreciate you spending the time with me. It's great to talk about this stuff. I love it.
Absolutely. You guys got such a great bunch of guys over there, over in Michigan. Tickled to.
We do. We got lucky.
Yeah.
We got lucky.
Yep. And
Brian Burkhart.
Yeah.
Good bunch of guys.
Well, I'm going to wrap this up and grab my bow and go down to the range and heckle everybody, and it's all about the people, right?
Show them how it's done. That's right.
I don't know about show them how it's done, man. We talk about a cracker. We got an 80. I don't know what his birthday is next week. He's probably going to be 82, 3, something like that. He's tough to beat, man. He is tough to beat.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's been doing it a long time, huh?
Oh, and I cut him no
great.
slack. No. He's had so much work done. Yeah, he's got so much work done to his body. I always tell him, no, that's cheating. You're recurve aided now. You're not unaided. You're aided.
That's right. you might not have wheels and pulleys on your bow, but you probably got them inside you.
Yeah, dang right.
That doesn't count.
All right.
That's all fun.
Yep, you betcha. Hey, take care, John, and let's stay in touch.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. You take care too.